Hey guys, welcome to Screenwriting in Paradise, the podcast. Today we're going to go mining for gold again, looking for great storytelling in a classic film and looking for how they create fate, how they make things happen in a particular sequence in this particular film. 3 Days of the Condor, which stars the late, great Robert Redford. He passed recently. Fantastic actor. Ton of great movies like All the President's Men and The Sting, did those Paul Newman movies, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. But one of my favorite movies of his that he starred in was 3 Days of the Condor, a Sidney Pollack film from the mid-'70s. And it's one of the great openings to a thriller. That's why I'm picking that one for today. I just always love the opening because it really gets us involved. It sucks us in. It's great, efficient storytelling, with a great sort of twist to it in the way he does it. But mainly it's not only about creating fate, but the choreography of how Sidney Pollack and company create fate in this wonderful little film. So I definitely recommend watching it. Sure, it's an older film, but it is classic. It's set in New York City in the 70s, so just for that matter, you should watch it because it's down in dirty, gritty, old New York City, where all of us probably would have loved to have lived in a loft back then because it was funky and fun. It's not, as clean as it is now. But regardless, let's just jump right into it. And again, I'll just go over the introduction because I think it's a super, super amazing introduction to a thriller. Probably my favorite opening to a thriller of all time. It starts with a woman in a office, with a lot of books and old-fashioned kind of digital computers and stuff, and copy machines. It's classic 1970s office with classic 1970s music. And it's really pretty, like Asian woman is walking around doing some copying in the office. And meanwhile, we have her boss come into the office and he's looking for this guy, Mr. Turner, Joe Turner, who is late. So apparently it's like the morning and they've started work and this Joe Turner dude is late, and Dr. Lapp, I believe is this older dude's name, is a really annoying boss, probably pushing pension age, retirement age, and just being nitpicky. Like, where is Mr. Turner? Where's Joe Turner? And he goes into Turner's office, actually, and it's empty, of course. And on the wall is a picture of Einstein. And so, the way people live, even though they're fictional, or the mode of transportation they drive, which I'll tell you about in a moment, often reflects a lot on them. And Joe's office, and Joe, of course, is going to be Robert Redford when we meet him, is messy, a bit messy, but it's also academic. There's all sorts of kind of intellectual stuff, but mainly Einstein's on the wall. Of course, you have to know who Einstein is, but he's pretty iconic, the big old white mustache and stuff, this big poster of Einstein. So whoever this Turner dude is, he's probably pretty bright because his hero, because there's a poster on the wall, is Einstein. A little over the top, but it actually works pretty well. So Dr. Lapp is annoyed and can't find Turner because he's late again. And he goes downstairs and it's like a 3-story office they work in, old-fashioned office in New York City. And he goes downstairs and tells his chain-smoking secretary, Edwina Ray, I believe her name is. I can't believe I remembered her name. But she's literally chain-smoking the whole time. So literally in the first shot, her ashtray has like 4 cigarettes in it. And by the end of this whole sequence, there's like 9 or 10. So she's been smoking the whole time. She can even smoke, like she's one of these people who can put a cigarette in her mouth and smoke without her, it being in her fingers. So she's typing while she's smoking. I've always, I actually used to smoke back in the day a bit, and I could never do that one. I always had to have it in my fingers. I could never just have it hanging out of the side of my mouth like Clint Eastwood, with his cigars and Good, the Bad, and the Ugly or something like that. Anyway, I digress. So we cut from Mr. Turner, or Dr. Lapp rather, the old nitpicky boss, moaning about this guy being late, Joe Turner, or Mr. Turner, as he calls him. And then we literally cut to Joe Turner on a moped. So that's his mode of transportation. He's literally driving a moped, one of these little cheap French scooters. And this is the mid-'70s. And he's driving it like down, I don't know, Fifth Avenue or, one of those big, huge New York City streets. And I don't know if you've ever driven in New York City, but it's madness. It's one of the scariest places to drive as a driver because you're fighting with trucks and taxi cabs and crazy people all over the place and like 8 lanes of traffic. And he's driving a moped, and it's 70s, so the buildings are all nitty gritty, dirty, and the cars around him are all those big old V8s, like old Chrysler Cordobas and Ford LTDs and crap like that. And he's hollering at the guy next to him, like, hey buddy, move over. He's on his moped, but it says a lot about him. He's a maverick. He's different. So he comes to the office, which is a big old-fashioned office building. I don't know, 112th Street or something. I have no idea where. Somewhere in New York City. And he's locking his moped up outside the front door, and on the door there's this big gold label for what the name of the place where they work is, and it's called like the New York Literary Historical Society or something. It's basically literary and historical. And but then across the street, we have this view, and this is called not creative license, it's called dramatic irony. The omniscient view. Basically, we get to see what the characters in the film don't see, right? So we get to see what's happening across the street, which is this dude who's in a car, and he's some dude with glasses on, and he's watching the front entrance to this historical, novels or whatever I called it before, literary society, and he sees Joe Turner, with his moped, and he pulls out this folder, and he's a bunch of photographs, like headshots of people, and one of them is literally Joe Turner. It's Robert Redford. It's actually, I think it's one of Robert Redford's literal headshots from either modeling or a movie. It's an early one. It's way too pretty. I would have used something much more nitty gritty. But anyway, it is Joe Turner, aka Robert Redford. So he literally he has a list of like 12 people, and he checks off Joe Turner. It's actually typewritten, Joe Turner. So he crosses his name up, and there's a bunch of other names crossed off. So obviously, he's watching people go in and crossing their names off. So something a little ominous there, and probably the music is a little ominous. I can't remember when he's watching. So Joe, meanwhile, goes up to the entrance of this historical society and novels. What did I call it earlier? Literary society. And that's what it is. It's a literary society, and looks up at a camera. So it's funny because it's something as harmless as a literary society has a security camera, but hey, it's New York City, so we're not thinking anything at this point. And he looks up at the camera, and he's wearing, it must be like fall, because he actually has like a ski hat on, and he pulls it down over his face, so he looks kind of like a bank robber, and then he does like a peace sign at this security camera. And inside is this chain-smoking Edwina Ray, the secretary, old-fashioned 70s secretary, and she's, mid-50s, something like that, smoking her cigarette. And she just doesn't even smile. She just looks at it. And next to her is this new security guard, this other dude, this probably also in his late 50s or something. He's definitely new at the game. He's like, hey, what's he doing out there? That's not okay. And she buzzes him in. But when she buzzes him in, which is really important, this is called setup and payoff, simple screenwriting, storytelling stuff, we see that in her drawer, because she has to open her drawer for some reason to buzz him in, there's a gun. And it's not just like a little tiny pistol. It is like a, again, Clint Eastwood, 45 Magnum kind of, is a big old handgun. It's just sitting in her drawer. So that, that makes you think, like, why is this, chain-smoking secretary have a huge gun in her drawer? And of course, we'll forget about it because a whole bunch of stuff's about to happen. But that gun will come back. They usually do. It's, it's an old rule of thumb. You see a gun in once, it'll come back, It's called setup and payoff, right? So we see the gun. She buzzes him in. He comes charging in. And, he's got a great sense of humor. He makes some kind of joke about bucking headwinds, which is on his moped. He was late because he was bucking headwinds. I love that term. I don't even know if it's used anymore, but it's basically, I think it refers to like a deer bucking, weaving through the wind. And the wind was slowing him down, so he's bucking headwinds. But that's why he's late. But he's like literally smiling and running by this lady who's totally could care less about him. She's, by the book, smoking her cigarette, and the security guard who's annoyed with him for pretending to be a bank robber. So then Joe charges past Dr. Lapp's office, his elderly boss who's been annoyed that he's late, and pokes his head in there. And Dr. Lapp is in there standing on like a chair watering his plants. And his office is actually interesting because it's full of plants. Not one, but like 6 or 7 big green ones. And he's watering one of them. So basically, Pollock is giving this character, it's basically a throwaway character because he's not going to be in the movie much longer, but he's giving him a little bit of a life. So he has a hobby, and his hobby is plants. He loves his plants. And despite being a bad boss, he's good with his plants. And so he's watering his plants, And he looks at Joe, he's annoyed because he's late. And, oh, Mr. Turner, you finally showed up. And Joe actually points at one of the plants and says, oh, Dr. Lapp, you got a blight on your, pleurbis birch, something leaf over there. It's some Latin name. He actually knows the name of the plant in Latin. And basically, it's hilarious because he's one-upping Dr. Lapp. It shows that, A, Joe Turner's super bright. That's maybe why he likes Einstein. But he has general knowledge of everything. But he actually knows about plants too, and more than Dr. Lapp. So it's just annoying for Dr. Lapp because you can see in this little sequence he loves his plants and he doesn't know enough to fix the blight on the leaf of the Latin plant, or the laurel or whatever that Joe is pointing at. And Joe even tells him what to do. Spray a little water on that with a twist of lemon or something. It should take care of it. And it's kind of hilarious because that means Dr. Lapp is basically annoyed because Joe is one-upping him. He knows more about plants than he does. Again, it's a great little character trait that that Joe develops throughout this whole sequence because he has, kind of broad general knowledge of everything, and it can really rub some people the wrong way. So Turner continues anyway, jogging past, his boss now, and going up the stairs and goes into his office and starts working right away. And then in comes this really pretty woman who was at the very beginning of the movie that I mentioned, working on the copy machine or, the digital computers. And she walks in and she kind of looks both ways because there's, I think, 3 or 4 people working upstairs too. And she looks both ways and then she kisses him on the forehead. And that's important because a kiss on the forehead means they're having a relationship, but they're not married, and it's not like a soulmate thing. It's a new relationship. That's why she looks both ways. And she also doesn't kiss him on the lips, she kisses him on the forehead. But it's surely a sign of intimate affection, right? And actually it means that probably nobody in the office knows they are having a relationship because it would be faux pas or something. But it's clear that it's a new relationship because of the kiss on the forehead and that she looks both ways, right? It's just a visual, but it's a smart visual. And it'll come back, which I will refer to actually also in a little bit. So Joe gets up and goes into the other office and has some banter with a couple of his other colleagues that I call Tweedledee and Tweedledum, because again, they're these sort of expendable, deserve to die characters. I'll get to that later. That's not a spoiler alert, by the way. But he talks to them for a moment, and then we hear shouting from downstairs something about the mail. And he's like, oh, the mail's here. And one of them, Tweedledee, I think, gets up to get the mail. He says, no, I'll get it, says Joe. And this is creating fate because that means Joe goes downstairs to get the mail, right? So when Joe leaves the office upstairs and goes back down the stairs the way he just came up to get the mail, he actually sees in the security camera, the same one that he was in earlier, setup and payoff, but instead of being him, with a ski mask over his face, it's 2 kids are outside messing with his moped because the security camera, shoots the entrance, the exterior, the outside entrance of this literary society. And so a couple kids are out there messing with his moped. So he runs out there past the mailman and greets them, like says, can I help you? And the kids look up, they're just about to steal his moped. And again, they're like 13 years old, which is also important because his reaction is, can I help you? They flee, and he goes, okay. So he's actually a nice guy, and if he wasn't a nice guy, he would have been screaming and yelling at him, chasing him, whatever. And of course, if Pollock had made them big guys or real thieves, it would have been a different story. It was perfect that they're kids because it's the likability factor. We want to be on Joe's side. He's a nice guy, so he lets these kids go. He's just, basically like, excuse me, can I help you? And they're like, whoa, they run off, and he's like, okay. But the main thing is he's outside, and he looks up, and it's starting to rain. He's like, because he'd actually said something about that earlier too. He's going to rain at 9:43. He knows everything, right? It's going to rain today. And he was right. It's starting to rain. And that's important also. I'll get back to that. So he goes back inside the office and, grabs his package or whatever. And we hear something about a package from Persia or something. So it's kind of getting weird what kind of work they're actually doing. It's not just boring literary stuff. It's something mystical or mysterious, rather. Which leads us right to the copy machine. He goes upstairs and there's Dr. Lapp comes to bother him because he's actually trying to fix the copy machine, because Joe can do everything, even fix copy machines. And Dr. Lapp even remarks on it. We have people who can fix those things. He's like, "Oh, it's not that hard, Dr. Lapp. It's just really, taking the time to look at it," or something like that. So he's trying to fix this copy machine, and Dr. Lapp says, "Joe, or Mr. Turner," he calls him Mr. Turner, "are you entirely happy here?" Basically, he's saying, the subtext is, don't you want to quit? I wish I could fire you, but I can't. But don't you want to quit? Because I can't stand you. He's like, "Are you entirely happy here?" And Joe responds, he goes, "Well, yes and no. It's just that I wish that I could tell people what I do." And that's when we realize, oh. And and right after that, there's some sort of comment about Langley. And Langley, if somehow you don't know that, is not the code word; it's slang for the CIA, because it's based, I think, in Langley, Virginia, the Central Intelligence Agency. So basically, they work for the CIA, and that comes out at that copy machine scene, because Dr. Lapp's asking basically to quit, or please, won't you quit? Are you entirely happy here? And we learn that they are, working for Langley, because Langley had sent over some instructions for something. And then Joe follows it up with not only saying that, he wishes that he could tell people what he does, but he says, I actually trust a few people. So his problem is that he actually trusts a few people, and he can't tell them the truth about what he does. And for me, that's like the whole theme in the movie. Right there. This guy works for the CIA. That's sort of a good reveal right there, 6 or 7 minutes into this movie. And it also makes sense of why someone was sitting outside checking off names, because there's spy stuff going on. But it gives some real oomph in wanting to follow Joe Turner, to care what happens to him, because he cares. He actually cares about people, and he doesn't like lying to them. And Dr. Lapp, meanwhile, is like, "Oh, well, I don't understand how you can't get over that," because he could care less. Dr. Lapp is fine with lying, even to his wife. Everybody, "I work for the New York Literary Society, not the CIA." It's totally true. People in that business actually never tell people what they do. My dad had his best friend. He's actually still alive. I think he's like 97 years old, but he has never told anybody what he did. My dad says he definitely worked for the NSC, I think it was called. It was a precursor to the CIA. But my dad's friend was never able to tell anybody what he did, or really did. So it's based on truth. So Joe, anyway, has this good comeback to Dr. Lapp again, and he doesn't quit. And then Dr. Lapp says, "Well, it's your turn to get lunch, Mr. Turner." And again, this is creating fate. This is really good storytelling, because it means Joe's going to have to leave, right? We have to get Joe out of this office, out of this building. How do we do that? Oh, it's his turn for lunch. Oh, if you're a storyteller, they actually have takeout lunch. They have takeout every day. They don't bring their own little lunch boxes or something like that. No. They take turns going out and bringing back lunch from the local deli or wherever. And this particular day, it is Joe's turn. And that's really important, because something's going to happen pretty huge in just a moment. And you'll see if I ever get there. So bottom line is that Joe says, "Okay, I'll get lunch." And he runs back down these stairs again that we've seen him go down before. And when he gets to the bottom of the stairs, instead of going out the front door the way he came in, there's a back door, and he goes down out the back door and down some stairs there. And the security guard, this new security guard's hollering at him, "Hey, Mr. Turner, you can't go down that way. What are you doing?" And this chain-smoking secretary, Edwina Ray, makes a snide comment to this security guard. Says, "Oh, Mr. Turner always goes that way when it's raining, because it saves him a block." So now it's this thing called motivation also. Joe has a motivation to go out the back, not the front, right? He has to go out the back door because it's raining. And we saw him earlier go outside, confronting these kids stealing his moped and looking up and seeing the rain. So we remember that, we the audience believe it now. It makes sense. Oh, he's going out the back because it's raining, and he saves a block when he goes to get lunch for these guys at the local deli. So Joe is scrambling out, down through this basement, which is full of like cobwebs and bookcases and lots of books down there, and goes, through some kind of old door, through some back basement alleys, and finally comes to a staircase that goes up back to the main street. And it's raining out when he gets out there, so he pulls his jacket. He's like a tweed coat on. He pulls it up over his head and runs the last 100 feet or so to this deli in the corner. And what's important there is the guy sitting out front with the folder full of photographs, including Joe's, and the checklist is still watching. And he hasn't seen anybody leave, of course, because Joe didn't come out the front door. He went out this obscure, weird back way, and he had his jacket up over his head. So he came out, he probably popped up 100 or 200 feet down the street. Why would this guy even notice? So in this guy's mind, rather, everybody's still in the building, right? So what's gonna happen? Very, very cool. Joe goes into the deli and has some great banter back and forth with the chef in there, and then a couple of the locals. They're talking about some sort of funny intellectual stuff to do with, I think it's Mozart and Van Gogh. How Mozart, or rather Van Gogh didn't start painting until he was 30, and Mozart started when he was 3, but they both died paupers or something like that. Whatever. It's just some kind of funny back and forth. But the great moment, I think, is right next to him is this kind of blue collar dude. And he's like, "What is this? The New York Public Library? I don't come in here to get educated." And Joe turns to him, Robert Redford, and says, "Yeah, you come in here to get sick, just like everybody else." I love that line. And the chef's like, "Hey, that's not funny." So, but what you get from this whole little sequence in the diner is that he comes there, once a week to get takeout. So he knows these guys. He's a regular. So it feels real. It feels like, we're not just visiting him for those 2 hours we get to visit him in this movie. He's been there before, and we believe it. He has this good repertoire, this good, badgering with these guys that goes back and forth every time he comes in there. But meanwhile, a little more ominous, we go back outside of the New York Historical Literary Society, and a mailman and this guy Max von Sydow, this great old Swedish actor, and another guy in a poncho arrive at the front entrance. And the mailman stands and looks up into the security camera, and Edwina Ray buzzes him in as the mailman, and they all three walk in, and the mailman pulls out a machine gun with a silencer and blows away Edwina Ray. And it's a great shot. If you have time, go watch the video. I actually managed to have that clip in there where when he blows away Edwina Ray, she literally goes feet up, and she has high heels on, and they're pointing straight up. If you freeze it, which I did, the freeze frame, her legs are straight up when she's dying or when she's dead, and then she goes down. But anyway, it's just a hilarious shot, even though it's very violent. But there's no blood. But anyway, so Edwina Ray gets shot, and then they, of course, turn to this hapless security guard and blow him away too. And then they go upstairs, and where there's this woman, the new love interest, like I was saying, the one who kissed Joe on the head earlier, and Tweedledee and Tweedledum. And they go upstairs, and this is also important, the choreography part. They do not go to Tweedledee and Tweedledum first. Or no, the first thing we see is, I take this back. They've just killed the two people downstairs. Oh, they killed Dr. Lapp as well. So Dr. Lapp comes, he's walking down the stairs, probably from the copy machine, and they blow him away. Literally he's blasted against the wall and rolls down the stairs dead. So 3 people have been shot, and then they go up the stairs, and then we cut into almost like the very initial shot with this pretty woman inside this inside where all the old-fashioned digital computers and books and stuff are, and she's again near that copy machine. But we see there's like a glass door at the end of the office, and we see the mailman come up with we see his pistol first because he has the gun in front of him. So we see the gun first, and it's again great choreography because she's walking, looking at her book, and doesn't see the gun, and then she goes left just as he comes across the window, so he doesn't see her and she doesn't see him. And that means that she's not going to be shot yet because he hasn't seen her yet. So it means he goes in, he sees Tweedledee and Tweedledum with the other hitman, and they blow those 2 guys away. And then they come back, and it's cool how they do it, because they come back and it's not this mailman or the other dude, it's the Max von Sydow, who's the leader character, who's got his like fedora on, and he just kind of looks at her, and she looks up at him, because you hear the digital computer copiers go dee 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 dee, and she looks up and says, "Oh, And they both know what's going to happen because they're both professionals. I mean, she works for the CIA and he's a professional hit person. And so basically her first words when she looks up at them, and of course they have guns, is, "I won't scream." And he's like, "I know. Can you please move away from the window?" And he wants her, of course, to move away from the window because when they blow her away, they would shout out the window and then people outside would see it. And she's a professional, so she moves away from the window and they blow her away. And very tastefully done if you can tastefully kill anybody, I guess. But so that's number 4, right? So 4 people are, or 5 and 6 because Tweedledee and Tweedledum. So anyway, everybody's dead in his office now. Meanwhile, we go back to the diner and Joe is walking out. He's got a bag full of, not donuts. He's got a bag full of sandwiches, and including it's great. Actually, just to backtrack for a second, there was another great line. What was it? He was when they were making the sandwiches. He points at one of them. He says, "Hey, careful with the butter on there. Ray gets pretty panicky about butter." So those little dialogue things are so important when you want to add character to characters and visual stuff. You could have said, "Hey, just not too much butter on Ray's sandwich." Fine, right? But Ray gets panicky about butter. So you almost visualize Ray getting, there's too much butter on my sandwich. I just love that line. I love little lines when they're clever and smart like that. But that was back when they're inside the diner, but now we're outside the diner. Joe's got his jacket on. He's got his bag full of sandwiches because he's going to bring lunch back to the crew that he doesn't know has been wiped out or is still in the process of being wiped out. And the big difference now is that he looks up, or he doesn't even look up. He just puts his jacket on and walks casually because it's not raining. The rain has stopped. So he's going to go back the normal way. He's going to go back in the front. There's no reason for him to save a block and go through the back alleys and all that stuff. He doesn't need to. He'll just go back the normal way. So Joe goes back the normal way. And when he gets to the door of, and I think actually there it probably does cut back into, that's where she gets shot. I think they cut back 2 or 3 times, but she gets shot and then he arrives at the front door. So the timing is really interesting because, we're assuming they're still in there and it's creepy and he's going in. We're like, "Joe, don't go in there. Don't go in there. No way, Joe. Don't go in there." Because we like him at this point. He's done a couple of things that's been nice. He let those kids go or stealing his moped. He's had some fun back and forth with these, people at the diner, and he's, made fun of his stupid boss, Dr. Lapp, and, he's a good guy. We don't want him to die. At this, we're on board. We're on board, baby. So he arrives at the door of the Historical Society with the camera up there, but this time it's a little different because the door's open, like a jar, and that's not normal. It's absolutely not normal. And, he pushes the door open, he comes in, but he's still like, that's weird. And he walks in and he sees the security guard lying in the distance, lying on the floor. And he kind of laughs. He's like, "Hey, what's going on, guys?" And like in that fraction of a second, he's such a great actor, Robert Redford. In that fraction of a second, his face changes because he realizes what's going on. It's like, why is he lying down? Oh, he's not drunk, he's dead. Oh. So he charges over there, with this bag of sandwiches and squats down and looks at the security guard and he's like, and then he suddenly looks over his shoulder and of course Edwina Ray, the Chinese-spoken secretary, is blown away behind him. So he flips over, he like jumps to that, to the left and drops the bag of sandwiches because they don't matter anymore. And then he goes, "Oh my God." And then he looks up the stairs and there's Dr. Lapp lying dead on the stairs. And this is hilarious too, with his toupee on one of the stairs. So his toupee had fallen off when he got shot. And it's just a fraction of a second. You wouldn't notice it, I don't think, even in the movie theater. But if you're slow motion, you see it. But anyway, regardless, it's just symbolic of Dr. Lapp because he's the one who doesn't mind lying, right? Even about himself. It's sort of like the big lie when you wear a toupee. "I'm not really bald. No one will know." But anyway, Joe then, of course, cares about one person. Who's the one person he actually cares about in that office? The woman. So he runs up the stairs to find her, and here's the choreography that's, again, interesting, because he could go find Tweedledee and Tweedledum first. No. It's important, and I'll tell you why in a second, that he finds her first. So he, of course, goes to the right into the office, and there she is, lying on the ground next to the copy machine. clearly dead, but, or shot anyway. And he runs in, he picks her up, and, he's really upset. And then there's this great close-up where his face tells us he knows she's dead, because he's picking her up. He's picking her up like anybody would do if it was a soulmate or his wife, sister, whatever, somebody he loves. But it's a new relationship, so it's actually okay if he doesn't run outside and scream for an ambulance, even though she's dead. Probably if it was his wife, that's what he would do. Even if she's dead, he'd still not believe it and try to get medical help. But what happens is he's holding her like this. He has this, light bulb, and not light bulb going off, but he has this realization that she's dead, and it's an acting thing too. Again, Redford just does it wonderfully. This sort of expression that just says, it's a close up of him going, like she's dead, and then he hears something, and he looks, out in the hallway, and of course at this point we still think that the hit squad, these assassins, are still here, right? They're in the they're in the other room or something. We don't know where they are. We didn't see them leave, and that's what he thinks too. It's like, oh my God, all these people have been shot. I'm here holding my dead new girlfriend, and there's a noise out there, and oh my gosh, someone's going to kill me now. So he quietly puts her back down on the floor and runs out to see what's out there, right? Or just charges out there real quickly, and the first officer he looks in is, Ray, panicky Ray, is dead because they blew him away. And then in the bathroom, actually, he's Tweedledee, the other guy, he's dead. And he's like, oh. And then he goes back downstairs because there's no hit squad up there. they are gone, but he doesn't know that still. But he basically backs out. So he has no idea what's going on. How we saw what happened. He didn't. He just knows they're all dead. But it's really interesting, the choreography, because we don't even see her again, his new girlfriend. He puts her down, and that's it. You never see her again in the movie. And it's important because, again, if it was like his wife or his lover, his long time soulmate or something like that, he would have had to bring her, no matter what. It's more important than anything. But since it's a new relationship and they're in the CIA, she's left there. But it's also important that that we have Tweedledee and Tweedledum later, because that gets him out of the office with her so that he can leave, and that he can leave without even looking back at her. So it's not like he takes one last look at her as he walks down the stairs. No, he put her down, that's that. He sees Tweedledee and Tweedledum have been, brutally murdered as well. He's got to get out of there. So he sort of backs his way down the hallway, down the stairs, like with his back to the wall the whole time, stepping over Dr. Lappin's toupee, gets down to Edwina Ray, who's still, lying on the ground behind her desk with a cigarette burning literally on her chest. And he picks up the cigarette and puts it out. Just also little things like that says something nice about him. But he takes her cigarette, and also shows how recent it was that she was shot, because her cigarette's still burning, right? And he puts it out, and then, and most importantly, he opens the drawer, and what's in there? The gun. And he picks up the gun. And even more importantly, when he picks it up backwards, like he's never held a gun before. He's like, excuse me. He picks up the gun, and he's, it's like he's never held the gun before. He holds it backwards, upside down, so he's holding it like, by the grip, and the gun's pointing this way. And then he backs out and, goes to the front door, of course, looks both ways, and goes outside, looks both ways. There's some lady with a baby carriage with glasses on that looks like a hit woman, and she's coming towards me. He's like, ah! But it's just a lady with a baby carriage. And he takes off. And that's it. That's the introductory sequence. He's survived. So Pollock, I think, and company, and Robert Redford did a great job introducing this character, making him, entertaining and empathetic. We want to follow him. But mainly, they make him survive. How do you get Joe Turner to survive this calculated assassination? It's for me, it's just totally brilliant. It's simple but efficient storytelling. I mean, you make it rain, so he goes out the back way. Nobody sees him. He pulls his head, jacket over his head, and he, goes and gets lunch while everyone else is getting killed. And again, with the choreography, timing-wise, we still think they're in there when he comes back. And when he comes in, of course, everyone's dead, but they're not there. But we don't know that. So we're tense too when he comes in, you know. So it's a really cool mix of visuals, you know, of who knows what, you know, because sometimes it's, again, what I called earlier, dramatic irony, where we see what they don't, but sometimes we're right there with them. So it's surprise, right? So it kind of crosses the line from dramatic irony to being right there with them at the end there, where Joe goes back into the office, because we didn't see the people leave. We didn't have that privilege like we do normally with dramatic irony. So really good filmmaking, really good storytelling. I highly recommend watching the rest of the movie if you have time. And I hope you'll join me next week when I look for something hopefully equally interesting.